You're watching the TCMMA podcast.
Ramadan is officially over. Ramadan is officially over. And how does this affect the UFC? It affects the UFC big time because the UFC has a lot of Muslim fighters, Islam Makhachev, Khamzat Chimaev, to name a few. And they can eat during the day now. They can eat at night. They can eat whenever they want. And training is going to start to heat up for both of these guys ahead of highly anticipated fights. Islam hasn't had any fight made official yet. That's what Dustin Poirier is talking. Khamzat is going to be fighting Robert Whittaker in about 2 months. So that's plenty of time for him to put on the weight and then shed the body fat and be ripped and in great shape for that fight. So I'm glad it doesn't affect me, right? Ramadan, I'm not fasting, although it's very good for your body to do so. Let's be real. Even if you're not Muslim, it's very good for your body to fast. So for these Muslim fighters, which is why I'm intrigued by it, have cleansed their body. They're ready to rebuild it. And they're going to be ready to go in the best possible scenario, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months after Ramadan. So I look for a very healthy Khamzat to come in and absolutely dominate Robert Whittaker. That's one of those fights where I will not break ever. I think Khamzat beats everybody. It's as simple as that. And especially now that Ramadan is over, we're going to start seeing some training footage. We're going to see, if you could say, a return to normalcy in a sense that, listen, if you don't fast like me, you're thinking of it like, man, I can't eat all day when the sun's up. That is some dedication, man. That's not easy to do. But they do it every year. And they come out healthier on the back end. And this is why these guys are smart. Some of the Muslim fighters will fight during Ramadan, but they're smart not to. Let your body heal, cleanse, get everything out, and rebuild it, man. And that's what Khamzat and Islam are doing right now, and I expect them to come out and both get victories, obviously, if you're Islam, in their next fight. Please believe it. Now, let's shift gears to ranking the 13 fights at UFC 300. This is via MMA Junkie, which I thought about doing this on the podcast the last time, but I was like, this is going to be ridiculously hard. So I'm glad they did it for us. We already discussed the bottom three, right? Jessica Andrade, Marina Rodriguez, great fight, but number 13 on this fight card, hard to believe. Bo Nickel, Cody Brundage is 12 because people expect Bo Nickel to go in and get the KO pretty quickly. That's why it's the first fight in the pay-per-view. It's trying to get the crowd hyped up, man, for the rest of the way. Jim Miller, Bobby Green coming in at number 11. Yep. And let's start to go down. Let me jump into the top 5 so you'll know which fights are eliminated. And as we get there, wow, number 5, Yuri versus Rakic. And I see that and I'm like, wow, what other 4 fights are better than that one? Because that's going to be a highly intriguing fight. This was a potential light heavyweight matchup just a year ago before both guys got injured. Jamal Hill came onto the scene. Right? Then Alex Pereira came onto the scene and got the belt at a time when virtually everybody's injured. And he fought a Yuri Prochazka that wasn't 100% in terms of, in terms of the mental game because he's coming off the injury. So Rakic is in that situation, but that's going to be a great fight. This one is interesting. Number 4, Davison Figueiredo versus Cody Garbrandt. Number 4 out of 13. And I don't know if I'd have it that high, but we did say the other day this is a great first fight. And I don't know if this fight's going to get the accolades that it should because it's going to be overshadowed by the rest of the card once this fight's over. But that is a great first fight. And to stick that at number 4 is interesting. The main event is number 3, Pereira versus Hill. That's number 3. So who's number 2 and 1? Oliveira versus Saruki in number 2. I dig it. Yeah. And you know I love Dubronx. I want to see him go off on Arman Sarukian. But I do think that's going to be a great fight. And the lightweight division's always got to be up there when you're looking at ranking a card like this. And number 1, I don't know about this. Justin Gaethje versus Max Holloway. And this is number 1 because people believe that Max Holloway cannot be KO'd. And it's going to be an absolute battle that Justin Gaethje will win. And Max Holloway might get pummeled in some cases during this fight, but he's not going to give up, and that's going to lead it to be potentially the fight of the night. And that's how you kind of rank this thing, right? If you had to look at one and say, what's going to be the fight of the night? What's going to go to a 3-round, or is this a 5-round fight? I can't remember. But nonetheless, if this goes to a decision and you're well over 100, 150 significant strikes, it could very well be the fight of the night. So I like the ranking here. I might change number 4, even though I like Figueiredo versus Garbrandt. That's a tough one to stick up at number 4 with all the fights on deck. But that's how MMA Junkie is ranking these fights. And it's highly interesting. It's a great topic for an article because when you're looking at 13 great fights, how do you really rank them? But they did it. And it totally makes sense. I have a couple differences, but I'm not far off from their rankings. Now, Dricus du Plessis refused to let Israel Adesanya dictate UFC 300 booking, right? Saying you are summoned when I say you are summoned. They needed to fill the void as the main event, and they wanted du Plessis to come back in like 6 to 8 weeks. And he's like, no, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. I need to be 100%. And that's where you start to see him respect Adesanya a little bit, saying, you know, in so many words, paraphrasing, that he's obviously a great fighter, was a great champion, and this is not a guy you can play around with. So regardless of all the talk you hear from these two, there's a lot of respect here. And Adesanya would probably benefit from a quick turnaround, and du Plessis is not going to let that happen. And this matchup is inevitable since du Plessis beat Robert Whittaker, and they came face-to-face at UFC 290. You remember that tirade that Adesanya let loose with the N-word how many times? I don't know. I lost count. But he went in there and went off, and it made for an interesting situation. And Adesanya knows how to hype up a fight, right? It's like you got to give Adesanya this fight. But I agree with Dricus du Plessis. He shouldn't be pushed around, man. He should not be pushed around. And he's not going to be. And that fight is going to be interesting. Because you can never count out Israel Adesanya. You just cannot count him out, especially when he's not the champ. Right? He's getting older. He's slowing down a little bit. These other guys are coming up. The youth is on the rise. And when he's the champ, they're coming. But now he's the one coming. And it makes him that much more tough to deal with when he's not the champ because he's hungry. And that's not a good thing for Dricus du Plessis. And we'll get to that prediction later, but that's going to be one that I'm probably going to drag on for 6 minutes rather than 2 or 3 because it's going to be hard to actually make a decision there. But we'll get to that when the time comes. Dana White reveals the origins of the BMF, declares Max Holloway probably the greatest featherweight of all time. So let's be real with the BMF. And if you didn't see the short we put out earlier, we detailed this in like 50 seconds, but the bottom line is the BMF belt was created really to hype up Masvidal versus Nate Diaz, who are two guys that are no longer really at that point in time. Maybe Masvidal was in title contention, but they needed a fight to fill the void on that particular card, and they needed to come up with a belt, and that's where the BMF belt really originated. Maybe it was thought of before this fight. Maybe you save it for the perfect scenario that you need to hype up a fight, and that's what they did. And now this thing is going and going and going. Islam Makhachev has already shut it down. Says, what kind of belt is this? This is not championship belt. It means nothing. And if Gaethje wins the belt and he gets it strapped around his waist, that doesn't do anything. This fight does nothing for Justin Gaethje. He really should have just sat and waited for the title fight because now it seems like Dustin Poirier, a.k.a. the Diamond, is going to sneak past him after a big win over Benoit Saint-Denis. If Gaethje was available, they would still be able to say, well, Gaethje beat Poirier, but now Gaethje's not available, so that discussion is out, and Islam wants to fight 3 times a year. So it seems to me like DP is up next, but they're going to wait till UFC 300's over because, you know, the Oliveira-Sarukian fight could have a lot to say in that, because if Oliveira wins, then he's deserving of a rematch. So if you're Dustin Poirier, you want this fight signed before UFC 300 starts, and it doesn't seem like that's going to be the case.
He's gon' fight, he's gon' fight, hold your breath till the end of the night. Last fighter call, UFC at its height, bringing that thunder with all his might, saying step up, wanna fight, hold up, think twice. Gladiator assassin, reckless, no abandon. Walk through that cage, he'll leave your ass